Welcome to another episode of Let's Parlay, where we are here to encourage you to bet on yourself and pursue all that life has in store for you. I am your host, Monty Taylor, and I have a very special something in my hands. That's right, you can guess it. It's the Holy Bible, and I just finished reading the entirety of it. And I want to share some of my takeaways and some of the things that I feel like could be helpful for you in reflecting on whether you should read it and some of the things that maybe you missed in reading it for yourself. So, that is what we're going to talk about today. So let's parlay. Welcome back, family. Appreciate you guys for tuning in yet again. Yes, we are at episode 27, and we are this close to hitting 30 episodes for the year. Like I said, I'm going to be just shotgunning this thing before the end of the year to make sure I get these in. So I am very excited to talk about this topic today, which is the Bible and me reading it in its entirety. So I want to give you some context onto how I did it. It was a little bit misleading holding up the physical Bible because I did not read the physical Bible the entire time. What I did was I downloaded, and I've had this app for a while. It's called the YouVersion app, and it's pretty popular. I think it has the most downloads out of any Bible app there is out there. But it has all different translations of the Bible, and you can search up different scripture. There's different reading plans in there. You could also invite your friends and form community in there as well too. You could do a Bible reading plan together with someone. It's a really, really effective app for getting into the Bible and reading it and making it a lot less of a high entry or high barrier to entry, I should say. So that's been really, really helpful for me is utilizing that app. And I found a Bible reading plan at the beginning of this year, or maybe the tail end of last year, I should say. But either way, I found the reading plan and I said I just wanted to read the Bible. I wanted to see if there was something where I can read it in its entirety for a year. And I found one by the Bible Project. Now, the Bible Project, I think it's two guys who run the organization, but they have a bunch of different like YouTube series and videos where they do these really cool animations where they're explaining different parts of the Bible and different concepts within the Bible as well too. And they're just so thorough. I got to give a lot of props to them for the way that they put it together. And for this plan, what it consisted of was, I think about two to like six scriptures a day. So like chapters of a book in the Bible. So for example, for me, most of my Bible reading days would look like a devotional video. So they would have like a quick message saying, hey, you're about to read this part of the Bible. Here's a video to explain a little bit more. And then it would be a maybe 3 to 10 minute video like on YouTube that they would link it to. And you'd watch that real quick. It would give you a lot of context before you go into the actual book and the scripture that you're getting into. And then after you read that, the next page would be the chapter of the book that you're reading within the Bible. So it could be like I just finished Revelations, which was the last book in the Bible. And it's actually Revelation. It's not plural. I always said Revelations and I didn't even realize that it was just a singular word, but just a quick tip for you. But yeah, I would have like Revelation 1, Revelation 2, Revelation 3. And then what they would typically do is throughout the entire reading plan, which consisted of 358 days of reading, after each one of the books, it would always finish with a psalm. And psalm is, I think, 140 something chapters within that book in the Bible. And there's a lot of wisdom. A lot of it was written by David. If you don't know who David is, go ahead and, do your research on him. But David and Goliath, if you're not familiar with the story, great king of Israel for a long period of time. But a lot of it was written by him. So you would just get a different perspective with Psalm at the end of the chapters that you read. And then that would be your day of reading. And I would say total each morning, it probably took up 15 to 20 minutes max. And yeah, it was just, like I said, low barrier to entry way for me to read the Bible and to have it structured so that it, made sense. Like I can have a plan where it wasn't going to take up too much time and it wasn't going to make me feel like I was reading more on some days than others. It felt pretty consistent. So, yeah, it was a really, really great experience. And I'm also just proud of myself for doing this. I am surprised by how many Christians I've met who have never finished the Bible or, I mean, let alone read the book for themselves, which I think is something we need to work on within the faith community. It seems like something that is really missing from someone's experience is their own personal relationship with the word and understanding what it all entails. So, yes, I want to talk about my takeaways from completing it because I had some assumptions going into the Bible. Because for me personally, I never grew up reading the Bible or going to church consistently. Both of my parents believe in God. Both of my parents' were, well, I'll say that for my dad, both of my grandparents on his side were very Christian, went to a Baptist church for the majority of my life. And then my mother's mom was very of faith, and she went to a Pentecostal church before she passed away a year before I was born. My grandfather, not so much religious. So yeah, I think for them, their experience with me was always, praying. I mean, we would pray before we hit the road, pray before we eat all the time. And that still holds true to this day. But as far as like getting into the Bible, talking about Jesus, talking about different stories, I was really new to this, coming into my faith journey. So for this year, I have always heard before I started this Bible plan, like different stories and maybe read different parts of the Bible here and there, got glimpses of the gospel, but never really sat down to read it myself. And I thought, okay, this is a perfect time for me to do this because I just really feel like I want to grow in my understanding of what I believe because I always felt I believe, but I also want to understand it thoroughly. So, highly recommended, by the way. 10 out of 10 read for anyone who wants to consider picking it up. So, I kind of wanted to talk about how the Bible is structured and also how this reading plan structured it for me, which I believe is very accurate and makes a lot of sense when you think about why we even believe in it. So many people, and I had this assumption when reading the Bible or hearing about it, is that, oh, this is the word of God and this is like God's direct words that were shared with us, which is not entirely true, right? These Bible books were written by men of history. And I always found this to be something that I grasped with is like, oh, like how could we, elevate a book that was written by man so much? Like, how could we? And when you think about it, it's like, well, that book that you read for your history class, I mean, you believe everything that they say in that history book. You believe everything that they say in your science books and all your educational books. Those were all written by men. So this suspicion around like a book being written by a man and also that the book is old and outdated, it's like, well, you put a lot of your faith in what you currently believe in from books that are outdated and written by men. So what's the difference between this and the things that you personally believe in? And I just always found that to be a contradiction in a lot of that criticism. I used to kind of have similar thoughts before I came to faith, so I understand. But when you break it down logically, it's like that doesn't really disqualify it from being something of value and also something that you can believe. So as far as the whole Bible goes, the entirety of it is really a storyline leading to Jesus. So the Old Testament, before Jesus came to be and was born, there were so many different prophets, there were so many different stories, and bits of information that was sort of trickled in there that was leading towards some Messiah coming. Someone is going to save God's people from their ultimate ruin. And, from the book of Genesis with Adam and Eve, which a lot of people are familiar with that story, obviously. From that point on towards Jesus, there were just so many different points amongst the Old Testament that hinted towards someone coming and a Messiah. And the crazy part is that throughout the entirety of the Old Testament, there was always this vibe that, like, is this guy it? Is this one the Messiah? Is this the chosen one? We all know that he's from the line of Abraham. We all know that he's from the line of, Judah or whatever. And it just kept on going and going and going. So all these major figures in the Bible, whether they be David, whether it be Solomon, whether it be whomever, they all had this underlying like suspicion from those who follow them. It's like, oh, maybe this is it. This is the person who is, who the prophets have talked about and have mentioned is coming, the chosen one, the Messiah. And obviously, all of that was incorrect for those people who made those assumptions, and it's because of the actions of those people who stepped into that place. And I think God did it intentionally. It wasn't by mistake. I don't think God made any mistakes. But each one of these individuals was anointed to be, such a powerful figure of their time. But they all fell to some sort of sin, and unfortunately, a lot of them being men that fell to lust and to sexual sin. And it's just interesting to see how much of a trend that was before Jesus came. And also to see how the people of Israel were just constantly, constantly catching L's with the Lord, like just they'd be so thankful one day, and then a period of time would go where they would be like, oh, well, we need a king. We need someone to, save us. God ain't enough. And then they would get a king, and then that king wouldn't be, anything near what they were being provided with from God, and putting so much of their trust in man, and then looking for the next man to be the one. So it's interesting how like there's a certain type of energy that God had in the Old Testament. There were all these different rituals and practices that the people of Israel had to do in order to right their wrongs and right their sins. And that is what's considered the law, right? Like all of those sort of traditions and things that put the people of Israel within certain boundaries to be right with God. And essentially, from what I read and how I see it, is that, God kind of was like, all right, this ain't working. I know that at some point, like, I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to step into a greater extent than I currently am, because these people can't follow the law. They always fall short. The people that I anoint always fall short, whether they be kings or whether they be the common person who believes. It's just within their nature to fall short. But I think that was all intentional, even from the start, right? Because there's a verse in Genesis that talks about after Adam and Eve had ate the apple, that conversation that God had with Adam and Eve, and talking about how he's going to send someone to step on the serpent's head and all that sort of stuff, or stomp on the serpent. Anyway, I'm paraphrasing, but it's in there. Just go read it. Anyway, all of that is leading towards, and it's kind of like the first indication that, like, okay, God's cooking something here. He's foreshadowing into the future, and throughout the Old Testament, all of the folks of Israel are just trying to figure out, like, all right, is this the one that he sent? And the prophets are constantly saying the Messiah is coming, the Messiah is coming. So then we land into the New Testament, aka the Gospels is what we start off with. And then there are other books within the Bible that are written by the apostles, right? By, the folks who had followed Jesus, and who eventually led to the real spreading of Christianity as a faith, and to, followers of Christ. So that's really the New Testament. And the Gospels, I thought, were really important for me personally, because I've found a lot of people, and I had it in my experience too, where when you don't read what Jesus had said, and if you don't read if you just don't read the Gospels at all, then a lot of what you're going to assume is that, Jesus was a guy, like he maybe was a priest or just a very wise fellow. But when you understand the culmination of like the Old Testament and it leading towards this point, it's like, oh no, this is the chosen one. This is who God sent to save us. This is the Messiah. That perspective is just really important to understand for folks who believe, is that, hey, the reason why we even believe in this Bible is because of the fact that it was foreshadowed throughout the Old Testament and then fulfilled with the gospel. That's a really, really important point that I realized from reading the Bible, and also reading what Jesus said himself. I mean, there's so much wisdom, there's so many parables, and there's so many things that he would say that not everyone would understand. And he talked about this. He was like, well, it ain't for everyone to understand. Those who are supposed to understand will, and those who won't. And he knew that he was going to have to pay the ultimate price in order to save, his people, right? Or to save the children of God and give us access to God in a way that we never had before. And he foreshadowed it as well too. And it's said multiple times throughout the gospel that, he knew that a day was coming when, and unfortunately his apostles didn't really feel like they wanted that to happen, but also I don't think they really understood what he was saying, leading up to the point when he was, eventually arrested and then crucified. And then, obviously his body being in the tomb, 3 days later, he rose up. All of that, they didn't really have an idea of how it would play out. And, it was a huge test of their faith. So yeah, I really find it important for people to read what Jesus said, because there's a lot in there about who he claims to be, being the Son of Man, being the Son of God, and being sent by the Lord as well too. And also, even there's not too much that's talked about before he starts his ministry, before he goes to John the Baptist and gets baptized. There's not much, but there is something. In Luke, I believe, I can't remember which chapter in Luke it was, but, there was a part in Jesus's adolescence where Mary and Joseph had, I think they had forgot him at home or something like that, which is kind of crazy. You just forget the Son of Man at home. You just left him in the crib, but it was different times. I don't know. And they realized it, and when they went back, they found him like amongst a bunch of ministers and priests and whatnot, just hanging out and learning, I guess, and doing whatever he was doing as baby Jesus, or toddler, or yeah, I guess like toddler Jesus. But anyway, it's just cool. You get to read that and you get to see, oh, there's a little glimpse of something that I don't think I've really heard many people talk about. And I just thought that was really cool to read, and yeah, just to see the different perspectives from, I believe it's 4 books in the gospel, and just seeing how they interpreted, the same situations or the same scenes and whatnot. I also think that there's a lot that could be said about the apostles and what they represent in, the human condition, and, whether it be jealousy, whether it be lack of faith, whether it be dishonesty. Yeah, there's just a lot that you can also pick up from those folks as well too. So yeah, very, very interesting. And I think what I wasn't too aware of was, post the Gospels, what the Bible really looked like. I had heard of Revelation, and I'd heard of other books, the names of other books, but I didn't really understand who was writing them, who were they intended for, all of that sort of stuff. And for me, I think my biggest takeaway from this was how important Paul was and is, to this day, to the fact that we're as aware we are as of Christ. If it wasn't for Paul, I mean, we wouldn't, the spreading of the gospel wouldn't have happened the way that it played out. It could have just been like a very small community of believers and it never went anywhere. But because of Paul, who, by the way, before he came to having a personal experience with Christ, he was killing Christians, so he's the least suspecting person that you would assume would go and be this impactful towards the faith and towards the gospel. So he was, he was a Pharisee, which is, really, really the worst of the worst. And yeah, he went ahead and completely changed his life after having an experience with Christ. And a lot of the books that were written after the gospel were written by him and two different churches that were starting post, the resurrection, and really to continue on the faith from there. So a lot of really, really important, scripture, and there's a lot of his teachings and a lot of what he is sharing from his perspective about, our intentions and what we could do as men and women of faith. So yeah, so that's a really, really important detail. And then on top of that, obviously the last book, Revelation, which I just finished reading, is a heavy one. There's a lot of like dark and apocalyptic energy, within the book. And there's a lot that you have to really understand the context for in order to appreciate it. And I still feel like I need to go back and read it thoroughly. But yeah, it was a crazy way to end the Bible. And there's all sorts of different types of literature within the Bible. There's like more of a narration of what's happening, and more of like a diary journaling format from David. There's poems as well. A Song of Songs is a crazy book within the Bible. A lot of people probably wouldn't suspect that would be in there, but for the married folks who are of faith, I'm sure y'all have read that. But yeah, it's just a very, very interesting culmination of different books. And I think what I've gathered from it is knowing the context and knowing the entire story and what it was all leading to. I have a different appreciation for it and also a different perspective on the Bible, to where it's not like, oh, like if I'm reading Corinthians, I know this is Paul talking to, the Church of Corinthian or whatever. And it's not as if like, oh, like you're thinking that this is what Jesus said or what God said or whatever have you. Yes, a lot of it is inspired by God, but it's also helpful to have the context to know what's being said by who and to whom. So really, really helpful and really impactful for me. And I'm just really glad that I did it. I also realized that throughout the Bible, like it's the playbook for how to live a righteous life. And it's also the evidence of what happens when you don't. Okay, like there's many different examples of leaders who, fell to sin and, just absorbed themselves with whatever that sin was because they started to feel and started to act out of God's righteous path. And it's just further cemented to me why it's important for me to follow through with what actually is in the Bible, whether that be committing to celibacy, whether that be to committing to not being drunk, or whether that be to committing to, financial stewardship and tithing or whatever it might be. It's like, oh, there's clear examples here of when God was instructing his people to follow through with what he said. And when you didn't, you took an L. And it wasn't maybe the quickest L, but it happened at some point. And there's so many different examples that I feel like we can compare our lives to and just realize like, oh, okay, like I'm having my Joseph moment right now. I'm in a pit, but I'm on my way out and I'm on my way to continuing, my family's legacy. Solomon, David, even Saul, there's a lot to learn from Saul. Like just a really, really, really impactful book. So that has been my experience, and those were my takeaways from it. I really appreciate the fact that there are, online versions and Bible reading plans within the YouVersion app. However, I think now I want to get more into the physical Bible and spend some time, really meditating on the Word. And I found recently that when I pray, the meditation aspect of it, where I'm listening and coming to God with obviously questions, with things I want to pray for, but stopping and letting, whatever comes after that to resonate with me. It's been really, really fruitful for me. Personally, I have had a streak of just waking up at 2 a.m. no matter what time I go to sleep and just being wide awake. And those have been some of my best times with the Lord. And being able to have the context of the Bible as well has just made it all the better. So that is all that I have to share today about the Bible and my experience reading it all. I highly recommend it, especially even if you're just curious. I think it's a great thing to pick up and read. The Bible Project Plan is fantastic. Maybe I'll link it in the bio or whatever so that people can have it. But yeah, those are my takeaways. I hope that you appreciated this, and I hope that this encourages you to pick up the Bible for yourself and read it in its entirety. But yeah, that's all I got, y'all. That's all I got. I'll be releasing 2 more episodes or 3 more episodes before the end of the year. So stay tuned for that. But as always, appreciate y'all for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe, comment, do all that good stuff. But for now, take care, God bless, and enjoy the rest of your day.